Hello, I am Michelangelo Maglake, a registered psychometrician. Welcome to the discussion topic about Introduction to Psychology, Growth, Maturation, and Development. Maturation is the process by which we reach the full limit of our inherited physical and mental potential. As the infant organism matures, more and more responses become physically possible. And training in making these responses is ineffective until the ability to make them has matured. And maturation can be observed in human infants and children, both in the development of fairly simple responses like walking and in the highly complex responses involved in the use of language. According to the concept of development, development refers to the process by which organisms grow and change over the course of their lives. Of primary interest are the changes that occur in physical growth and motor skills, mental or reasoning abilities, emotional expressions, and patterns of social behavior. Human development is best described as a continual and cumulative process. The only thing that is constant is change, and the change that occur at each major phase of life have important implications for the future. As you can see, we have a chronological overview of human development. It is composed of two columns, the period of life and the chronological time frame. At first, we have the prenatal, which consists of from conception to birth. It starts from conception to birth. And then we have infancy. After birth, it starts from the first 2 years of the life of a baby or of a child. And then the toddler and early childhood, which is 2 to 3 years of age. The preschool, 4 to 6 years of age. And after the preschool, we have the late childhood, which is the end of 6 to 13 or 14 years of age. It is the onset of puberty, which marks the end of this period. And we have the puberty where it is the end of the childhood to the early part of adolescence. After that, you would enter adolescence period, which starts from age 13 or 14 to 20 years of age. And after adolescence, you would grow up as a young adulthood. As a young adult, it would start or begin from the age of 20 to 40 years of age. And when you are already 40 years old, you would enter middle age. It would start from 40 years old to 65 years of age. And when you are already 65 years old, you would enter the old age or senescence, which is the end of 65 years old or above. Now let's talk about the first stage of life, which is the prenatal period, where life begins at the time of conception when a sperm fertilizes the ovum. And the union of the ovum and the sperm produces a fertilized egg known as zygote. The prenatal period is approximately 9 months or 270 days, and it is divided into the following: the period of the zygote, which is it starts from fertilization to the second week; the period of the embryo, which is the end of the second week to the eighth week; and the period of the fetus. This is from the end of the eighth week to birth. after the prenatal period, we'll move forward to the second stage of life, which is infancy, from the first 2 years of life. Well, after birth, life becomes very much in contrast with prenatal life. The infant, who used to be completely dependent upon the mother for continuous nourishment, breathing, urination, defecation, and other processes, is now starting to struggle and meet the demand to live normally. The birth cry is actually a reflex behavior to establish breathing, and other automatic or reflex responses, though unlearned, can be performed through stimulation. Among these are the grasping reflex, pupillary reflex, plantar reflex, knee-jerk or patellar reflex. The grasping reflex is exhibited when you place your finger in an infant's palm and he grasps it tightly, or the baby holds it tightly. The pupillary reflex causes the pupil of the infant's eye to contract if rays of light is shown onto the eye. And the plantar reflex occurs when you tickle the soles of the infant's feet and he curls his toes and extends his big toes. And tapping the patellar tendon below the kneecap will usually cause a kicking of the foot, and this is known as knee-jerk or patellar reflex. The newborn starts with other abilities like body squirming, twisting, rolling, bending, hip swaying, head rolling from side to side, and leg kicking. He cries, sucks, swallows, hiccups, grunts, vomits, urinates, defecates, blinks, and stretches. Well, the early childhood, which begins from 2 years old to 6 years old, uh, is called a toddler. And the term toddler adequately describes most 2-year-olds who often fall down when they try to go somewhere in a hurry. And as he matures, his locomotor skills develop or improve. And by age 3, he can walk or run in a straight line and leap off the floor with both feet. 3-year-old toddlers find it difficult to button their clothing or tie a shoe or even copy a figure on a piece of paper. And as toddlers, from 3 to 6 years old is known as preschooler when they reach the age of 3 to 6 years old. And they become very naughty and curious about almost anything. By the age 5, they start to be graceful and their balance has improved. And the preschool child becomes more fluid in their large muscle activities because they are losing much of their baby fats as they grow in height. And their eye and hand and small muscle coordination also improves as well. After the early childhood, the child then enters late childhood stage. And it's about the time a child enters the first grade. He can copy complex figures, cut out angular patterns with a pair of scissors, and print neatly and accurately. His improved small muscle coordination enables him to take up and enjoy hobbies such as assembling models, painting their numbers, and sewing. And by the age of 8 to 9, he can use screwdrivers and can openers and has become a skillful performer at games such as basketball, baseball, and soccer, which requires eye and hand coordination. Well, after the late childhood, the child is no longer a child. They enter the stage of puberty. And puberty sometimes overlaps the end of childhood and extends to early part of adolescence. And the term puberty refers to that point in life when the individual reaches sexual maturity and becomes capable of producing a child. It is generally assumed that a girl becomes sexually mature at menarche or at her first menstruation period. And the timing of puberty in males is much harder to pinpoint since production of sperm is not a readily observable phenomenon. The most common sign of masculine puberty is the appearance of pigmented pubic hairs. Once you reach the end of puberty, we would move forward to the stage of adolescence, which is the end of the 13 or 14 to the 20th years of age, where growth spurt occurs. It is the rapid acceleration in height and weight signals the beginning of your adolescence. And in addition to growing taller and heavier, the body assumes an adult-like appearance and during the adolescent growth spurt. The most noticeable changes are widening of the hips for the females and broadening of the shoulders for males. While maturation of the reproductive system occurs at roughly the same time as the adolescent growth spurt and follows a predictable sequence for each sex. And as a girl enters her height spurt, the breasts grow rapidly. Pubic hair appears and the sex organ begins to mature. For the boys, the onset of sexual maturation begins with the initial enlargement of the testes and scrotum. And the growth of the testes is accompanied or soon followed by the appearance of unpigmented pubic hair. After reaching sexual maturity, the boy's voice will begin to change from soprano of childhood to the baritone of adulthood. The problems of adolescent concerns his social, emotional, moral, and economic maturity. And an adolescent works towards the achievement of the criteria of adulthood, which are independence of family, emotional maturity, social maturity, economic independence, intellectual adulthood, use of leisure, philosophy of life, and achieving heterosexuality. We have differentiated here in this slide the problems that adolescent is concerned most during the age during their this part of the stage of development. Well, the problems of adolescent or growing adolescent's concern is his social, emotional, his moral, and economic maturity. Can he have a lot of friends? Can he control his emotions and fall in love? The identification of what is right and what is wrong, and of course, the ability to maintain and sustain his life by economic maturity. And an adolescent that works towards the achievement of this criteria in adulthood, when he reaches the ending part of the adolescence stage and enters the beginning stage of adulthood, he would search for independence of family. He would like to live alone or to be independent, or I would like to practice autonomy. And then he would look for emotional maturity, trying to look for or search for people or for person who has who can find who will have and share his intimate relationships. And then social maturity, he became more open to the society. And of course, economic independence, he would try to search for certain jobs that would sustain his own lifestyle. And intellectual adulthood, since he had already learned from the from education, from school. At by this time, he might be already graduating or already graduated and is starting to look for a job. And of course, he would like to find time for his leisure or use of his leisure. He is looking forward for spending time by himself or with his friends. And their philosophy in life also starts to develop. They find things about life, how to live happily, and how to look for something that you are longing for, and then of course achieving heterosexuality. Well, at young adulthood, according to Erickson, they must work towards settling down to a full life of work. And he should acquire social consciousness to be productive not only for himself but for others. And he must be ready and willing to accept responsibilities as a parent. And he must also achieve the criteria of adulthood. Now, during the period of middle or late adulthood, which is the end of the 40 years old and to 65 years old, during this period, physical and mental powers deteriorate. A man reaches his climacteric period and woman her menopausal period. The reproductive organs then slowly lose their functionability and motor and cognitive ability decreases with age. Middle-aged people divert their activities from those that need much physical exertion to the less and non-strenuous one. Now, when you've reached the old age or the end of your lives, it begins with the age of 65 and above, or for this generation, it's 60 or above. And old people become more eccentric and egocentric due to mental disorganization and physical breakdown. They become careless and absent-minded, sometimes socially withdrawn and poorly adjusted. They feel useless and worthless, and they become quite sensitive and emotional. And they develop such unfavorable self-concepts as well. Well, there are also general principles in development. It is said that development is a continuous process from conception to maturity. And development depends upon the maturation and growth of fatty casings around certain nerves of the nervous system. Well, the sequence of development is the same as for all children. And although the sequence may be programmed, the actual time at which a child reaches a particular step and his level of prior skills will vary with nutritional adequacy and environmental encouragement. It is also said that certain reflexes present at birth anticipate voluntary movements. And for example, the sucking reflex gives way directly to movements towards the breast by infants. And the direction of development is cephalocaudal or cephalocaudal. That is, coordination and control begin in the head region, followed by the spinal muscles in the head region, and finally the spinal muscles and legs develop coordination. It is also believed that it is a generalized activity that gives way to specific responses. Thank you for watching our lecture video about growth, maturation, and development. I am not requiring, but I hope you would subscribe for more lecture video presentations in the future. Thank you everyone and God bless.